take a step back and talk about what brought us here. No?
Okay.
So I wanted to ask Dean July, this particular impeachment, is this the end point of our regime of political dynasties? It was inevitable. It would happen this way.
Well, I've always painted this as the long legitimation crisis, no? That began after the EDSA revolution, no?
Okay.
As far back as the EDSA revolution, no? Because we were on our way to transitioning towards restoring our liberal democracy, our electoral democracy. Based on political science literature, if you have a successful, peaceful electoral transition for 2 electoral cycles, you're on your way to democratization.
Okay.
We've had that.
Yeah.
No? First from Cory Aquino to Fidel Ramos, from Fidel Ramos to Era Estrada. And then, of course, the
EDSA too.
the wetting scandal happened.
Sure.
No? And that unleashed this long question of institutional legitimation that hijack our transition towards deepening and consolidating our democracy. So I see this as part of that long ups and downs. No? We thought that during the time of course, GMA was the most disruptive period, GMA's time with all these impeachment attempts as well and coup attempts. And then Pinoy was supposed to bring back balance to the force, so to speak, right? But unfortunately, he had some missteps, which paved the way for politics of anger, which paved the way for the rise of the Duterte. And we are where we are right now because of this. Going back to dynasties, now more than ever, this is an indication that looking at the quality not only of our politics, but what's happening right now in the Senate, makikita natin na ito'y talagang question na ng kalidad ng mga hinahalal natin. So, one reason bakit tayo may long legitimation crisis is palaging nauunsyame yung pag-address sa political and electoral reform and social reform. Kada administrasyon, the way our presidential system has been established, follows that 6-year cycle na walang re-election. So, nakakalimutan palagi ng bawat administrasyon, a-address nila originally, economics palagi, di ba? Pero hindi nila na-address yung question ng social reform.
What is the role of this impeachment trial in this long legitimation crisis? Will it bring it to an end? Will it sharpen the...
Ironically, I've been to a briefing the other day, and apparently, the Gen Z and even the Gen Alpha, imagine, are now linking, the situation and their future and their dark future to institutions.
Okay.
And the problem is, and this is
that's
from
a good thing, right? Yeah.
This is from a big corporation that did their own market research, and it's a good thing actually. So in the same way that Attorney Paolo was 10 years old during the ERAP impeachment trial, this will be the people who will be voting in the future, right? And hopefully they will be the ones who finally realize that it's really the quality of the people we elect, the manner by which we elect them, and the rules of the game, that's important, for electing them. And first and foremost of this is, of course, now is the time to really come out with the anti-dynasty law, and of course the party list reform bill, which are 2 priority bills under the LEDAC of this administration.
When you started, you talked about the weaponization of impeachment, right? I've written before on the impeachment wars.
Yes.
We both agree this started with Estrada,
Yes.
right? But it also seems like that's the start of the long legitimation crisis.
Yes.
So impeachment is a weapon in the legitimation crisis.
Yes, because even the so-called forces of good governance and moral politics utilize the impeachment to go after Corona. And this provided fuel for the narrative of the populist forces, right? So, yun yung naging problema, So, kayo rin naman di ba? So, ano ginawa ni Duterte after nung siya na ang nakaupo, di ba? Hindi impeachment, pero napatalsik niya si CJ
Corona.
Sereno.
Sereno.
Sereno, yes,
Diba?
through Waranto.
Through Waranto.
Well, in the parang the Duterte-Marcos election and
Yeah.
split is really the late-stage capitalism equivalent of
Yeah.
the political dynasties.
Right, right.
But Ash Presto and I wrote on this last year, a brief piece on how impeachment was being used for the Duterte-Marcos divide.
Yeah.
This is not to say that the impeachable offenses or charges against the Vice President are without merit. The two things can be true at the same time.
That's right.
Pwede naman talagang impeachable yung ginawa niya, while at the same time acknowledging that you chase this impeachment all the way to February 2025 or even earlier, when the votes for the 2025 impeachment were being shepherded by then Speaker Romualdez. So, I mean, the connections might not be as clear as you would want them to be, but there certainly is that dynamic still playing out. Although I think complicated by the fact that the 2028 elections are also coming up, which I think, in addition to the politically compromised senators that Dean July was mentioning, will also probably, and especially if it runs longer, this impeachment trial, a lot of things can happen in 6 months. If it will take that long, will certainly have an effect on the votes.
All the more reason to have a less judicialized impeachment process, right?
Yeah. Although I'm going to have a very controversial opinion here
All right, okay,
about
let's have
that.
it.
I know that Duterte versus House, that decision has been much maligned, or at least much criticized.
Period.
And and yes, there is a lot in there that, as Dean Chell said during his oral argument, that more properly should be viewed as obiter dictum. But I mean, I'm willing to grant the Supreme Court the space to assume that they too had precisely made all of these prescriptions on how an impeachment process or how an impeachment proceeding should be initiated, what kind of evidence should be used, in an attempt to make sure that, impeachment moving forward would be a more factually credible process, in that it heightens the evidentiary requirement or what is needed precisely in order to initiate the impeachment proceeding in the first place. And perhaps there are examples around the world wherein impeachment has been so politicized as to essentially ensure that every year or so a president, I'm thinking especially of Peru, where a president will be removed from office because they don't have enough support from the legislative. And and I think that perhaps, granting that motive on the part of the Supreme Court, they would perhaps be looking at these impeachment and proceedings and saying, we've given you a blueprint. With this blueprint, which we precisely devised so that impeachment would be more credible in the eyes of the public, that would be the value of having issued, even if it were a preemptive ruling. But this is our step, or our move in making sure that it could be more credible in the future. Of course, the counter argument there, as A.D. Paolo has said, that is, it ensures a greater judicialization of the impeachment process, which again is it is the mandate of the Senate, a legislative body, and it is within their space, or they should be granted enough space in order to determine how impeachment proceedings should be conducted. So it would be, for example, I think appropriate for the Senate, notwithstanding Duterte versus House, to say, and this speaks to the argument of Attorney Poa earlier, that essentially the proceedings in the Corona impeachment trial have been more sort of modified because of Duterte versus House. The Senate could very well say, that is what the Supreme Court said, but impeachment is our process. We are the ones who dictate what the rules are, so we do not necessarily consider Duterte versus House as binding. Of course, they'll probably not say it so confrontationally as to provoke a quote-unquote constitutional crisis. But they could very well be of that mindset. And in fact, my own sense of the reaction of individual senators when Duterte versus House came out was, it appears that they were of that viewpoint.
Do you think, in fact, there are enough votes in the Senate?
Again, there's a significant number of senators who would readily embrace that argument. Diba? So that's the problem. No? So the way they've been behaving themselves, they pay lip service to institutional integrity, but at the same time, they are the source of the erosion of institutional by lawyering for the defense, for example. No? At least yung mga kilala natin na medyo nakakampi ng prosecution, hindi naman ganun ka-obvious, no? So, pero ito talagang, I mean, every time na lang, no? So, I think yun, no? That will be a difference between last time, no, in the last impeachment and this one. And sabi nga ni Attorney Paolo is really mas matindi kasi yung personal, no? Mas polarized talaga sila ngayon. No?
Yeah. Attorney Oli, how would you